Last week I put out a video about books that I didn't vibe with. This week I want to make a video about books that I accidentally vibed with a lot. Books I wasn't expecting to vibe with, but I did. Before we get into this, I'm going to talk to you guys about bookshop.org. Bookshop.org is where you can get all the links to these books available in the description down below. Bookshop.org works with local businesses and local bookshops to get them a little bit more of a kickback whenever you buy things on bookshop.org. Alternatively, pick up all of these books from your local library. We love libraries here. This is my first video, I think, with my new haircut, so what do you guys think? I like it. I think it's not fresh, it's been a week since I got it done, but I like it. The first book is This Green and Pleasant Land by Aisha Malik. I didn't think I would vibe with this, but I did. I picked this up from Scoob Books. It's a secondhand / independent bookstore in central London, and I just saw it. It's a trade paperback copy that I've got, and I was just like, that's a Muslim author's name, I'll pick it up. Sometimes books by Muslim authors set in the UK are a bit hit or miss. Sometimes they lean far too much into kind of the tropes about being brown, particularly Pakistani Muslim. They kind of lean into those tropes because like they can capture a wider, like whiter audience as well. But Aisha Malik, I've never read any of her books before, so I wasn't too sure. Going into this, I went into it, I really loved it. Very rarely do I have a book where, oh, this is a real page turner, and I just keep reading and reading. And, you know, I have slowed down my speed with which I read compared to when I was like 16, 17 and blitzing through books in a day. This book, however, I just couldn't put down. So it was really engaging. And so, yeah, I highly recommend it. Didn't think I'd vibe with it. I just picked it up because it was kind of cheap. I saw a Muslim name. And the trade paperbacks are like, they're nice. They're not, they stick out on a shelf, but they're kind of nice. So I just picked it up because, and I surprisingly enjoyed it. Up next is Angels with Dirty Faces, The Footballing History of Argentina by Jonathan Wilson. Again, you guys know I have a whole shelf dedicated to books about football. I really like football, but I just picked up this book because it was kind of there, and I got it basically for free. It was from like, I found it in the charity shop, so I was like, okay. It was like £1, so I'll buy it. And I read it, and I was expecting it to be a bit of a drag. I think I'd read Jonathan Wilson books before, but I didn't realise I'd read a Jonathan Wilson book before. And so I was like, sometimes when you talk about like history combined with sports, it kind of drags, but this was super engaging. Because not only is it talking about the actual history of the game of football in Argentina and kind of how it's developed over time. I think the copy I picked up went up until their Copa America win prior to winning the World Cup. I'm pretty sure that's where the book went up to, maybe before that. And not only does it address the footballing history and the footballers and the influence of different types of football and the wild and wacky like format of football in Argentina, kind of like the different types of championships you can win in a single season and the ways they go about it. But it also talks about Argentina as a country and the history of Argentina and how football is so engraved and interwoven with that history, and sort of how certain factions within Argentina were influenced by certain governments and certain leaderships in football, and how different players were affected by it, how the style of football was affected by it, the role of football in Argentina was affected by it. So if you're just interested in South American history and you have a cursory interest in football, highly recommend this. Or if you know you're really interested in football and have a cursory interest in South American history, also pick this up. Again, I thought it might be a bit of a drag. To be honest, I'd read a Jonathan Wilson book before, and then now realising, oh, I have read a Jonathan Wilson book, so it's going to be good, so I recommend it. Number 3, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Oh, look at this guy. He's read Crime and Punishment. Oh, what a badass. Oh my god. He loves Crime and Punishment. Listen, it was a challenge, and I lived up to the occasion, okay? I challenged myself, and I read it, and look, classics, they're a drag to read. I'm going to be the first one to say this. Absolute drag to get through. But this was interesting. Like, the first third of the book is like, oh my god, get to the point, Fyodor, get to the point. And then you get to that, so like the middle section, you're like, oh shit, Dostoevsky's got hands. And then eventually get to the end and I'm like, I'm surprised at the overall outcome of this and how like acceptable it is as an ending. And so, yeah, I mean, it took me ages to read. I think it was a third attempt as well. And when I read it, I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, man, I get why people like this. So yes, look, it's a bit pretentious to put Dostoevsky on this list, but I went into it thinking I'm not going to enjoy this, and I enjoyed it, so I think that's a positive thing. So, you know, if you want to give Dostoevsky a try Crime and Punishment. I probably would recommend maybe reading one of his shorter things. I think White Nights might be a better way to kind of get into it first. I wish I'd read that before I read Crime and Punishment. So maybe read that or one of his other shorter stories and then move on to something like Crime and Punishment, because you might as well ease yourself into it. I think that's probably why I struggled so much to read Dostoevsky, because I was just like, oh, okay, Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, let's go right into that, when I should have probably eased myself into it. And finally, This Is How You Lose the Time War. I'll be honest, I didn't read this book because the title was just like, to me when it first came out. And I was like, I'm not going to like that. And then I saw everyone like going on about it online. I can't remember when, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3. And I was like, I bet it's not that great. And then finally I was like, you know what, I'll give it a go. And then I read it and I was like, oh shit, this is a banger. This is a good book. I love that there's 2 different perspectives. I love that there's 2 different authors, but it still melds. And because there's 2 different authors, but the stories converge, it feels like it fits in. I like the story. I like the protagonists. I like the forbidden romance of it, which honestly, that's generally not for me. I'm generally not a person who's like, oh, forbidden romance, I need to read that. I like my, you know, cute, wholesome romance normally, but this kind of forbidden romance thing actually made sense in this, and it melded well with the whole time travel and interdimensional jumping type aspect of it, and the enemies to lovers trope. Again, generally don't like enemies to lovers. I want a nice, sweet, wholesome romance where everyone likes each other to start with. But it was great. I enjoyed it. It was engaging. It was good. I don't think there's much more I can say about this, but to go and read it if you haven't. Everyone's probably read it at this point simply because it was like, it had like 2 waves of popularity when it came out, and then when it got popular again. I don't think it was during COVID. I think it was after the COVID lockdowns, but it got that second wave of popularity and everyone was like, go and read it. And I was like, eh. But then I read it and I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. And so those are some books that I surprisingly vibed with. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books. If not, are you planning on reading any of them after this video? Hey, comment down below something like, I love banana bread with chocolate chips in the comments down below, so I know you got to this part. I don't know, I think some YouTubers do that and it works. So comment that down below alongside your opinions on the books, preferably. As I said in the beginning, you can get all these books, if available, from bookshop.org, where they kick back a little bit of money to local bookstores. If you can't do that, definitely go to your library, check them out. Libraries get a bunch more support if you go there and take out books from the library. You can also get stuff like audiobooks, video games, DVDs, manga from the library. Libraries are awesome. Go and support your local library. Thank you for watching, and I hope you read a great book today.